Hi. This is Marjolein. And you can hear me, but you can't see me because I'm talking to you from inside your own head. Don't believe me? Try this. Raise your left hand. Your left hand, yeah. Raise it. Raise it. See? I have control over your very bodies. I've spent enough time in your mind, so I'm going to travel back through the astral plane to my own body. So if you could please start the clapping and the cheering, and welcome to the stage, Marjolein Robertson! Thank you, jeez. Thank you so much, like genuinely, thank you so much. Having you all here, this means the world to me. And by world, I'm obviously referring to the best one, which is, that's right, Middle Earth. And by Middle Earth, I'm referring to the best age, which is, that's right, the second age. None of this Frodo destroying the ring nonsense. Team Sauron. Right. Most of you are now worried about this show. You're like, oh no, is it going to be full of nerdy shit? No. But what did you think of the music at the start? Give me a cheer if you enjoyed the music. You don't have to lie to me. How the show starts, I'm going to give you a little peek behind the curtain, as it were. So I was in Shetland before the Fringe last year, before the show ever became a true show. And I was sitting there. It's the day before I got on the plane back to here. Oh, if you don't know what that is, it's like a bird, but it doesn't talk back. And I was sitting with my nephew, Magnus. Now, Magnus is 2, and we were watching things on his laptop, which is like a book, but it hurts your eyes. And Magnus showed me his favourite thing to watch, and his favourite thing to watch of all time is just this 45-minute-long video on YouTube, and all it is music with a still painting of some trees sitting or standing. It's hard to tell with trees. And it's just 45 minutes of the music you heard when you walked in, right? And the genre of music is called dungeoncore. Like, I don't know about you, but if I was invited to a dungeoncore party, I'd be like, oh my God, this sounds like a basement full of asphyxiation. And it would be, but only because all the teenage boys left their inhalers at home. They just hand you 20-sided dice and tell you to roll for your character's life. That's dungeoncore, real nerdy shit. And my nephew Magnus, he loves this. He laps it up. He just adores it. And I was thinking of Magnus at 2 and thinking of all the things he's done for me because he's been working since he was 1. I was like, Magnus, you love this video so much. Forget that carefully curtailed playlist of tunes I've picked. Out the window, I'm playing this for an hour instead before the show. And Magnus, he said nothing because that conversation didn't happen. That's the peak. But that was the show. I did pick that playlist for him. But welcome to the show, Marj. But you might think, Marj, Marjolein, that's only the first 4 letters of your name. Why is the show called Marj? Well, I'll explain. You see, I was writing the title of the show when the pen ran out of ink. Last year's show was called Thank God Fish Don't Have Hands. No shortage of ink that year. Because I used blood. But what happened is, the reason it was called that is because every year I kind of come up with a joke, and then what happens is that joke is what the title's worked upon, that becomes the theme of the show. And what happened that year was I was trying to write a joke to base the whole show around, but the day came for the deadline entry for the show title, and I was suffering because I was tripping balls. Because I was fevered with COVID. And had taken half a tab of acid. And I wrote this one joke. This one joke was arguably, no, definitely the worst joke of that year's show, but it's the only joke to make it into this year's show, so here it comes again. Hey, you know when you have a pet fish and you can tell it's dead because it floats to the top of the tank? And you're like, oh no, my fish is dead. But goody goody, now I have dinner. It gets worse. Imagine a world where fish owned us as pets. So we'd have to live in the water because that's where fish like to live, wet. But we're mammals, we need air to breathe, so we'd be swimming to the surface to have a breath of air, but your fish owner would see you and think you're about to die and say, "No, Marjolein, you're not dying today," and drag you back down again, drowning you in the process. Thank God fish don't have hands. And that was that year's show. This is Marj. And I also want to say I've come here in my Shetland national dress. We call it clothes. It's nice to see you wore it too. Judging from your clothes, I could have put on more. But I'm always learning. We had a different education in Shetland. Give me a cheer if your school had maths. The one with the numbers, that's witchcraft. Give me a cheer if your school had craft and design. Yes, where we would knit for 8 hours a day. Another subject we had in Shetland. Give me a cheer if, like Shetland, you also had choir. Yes, where we would play fiddle. For the only voice in Shetland allowed to sing is that of the wind. And the last subject we had in Shetland, to a great degree, was nautical studies. Give me a cheer if you're not from Shetland or Orkney and you had nautical studies in school. Seriously? Oh, well, you don't count. Oh my God, that's how it feels. I spent too long down here. Give me a drink. No, so you're which island?
Millport, Isle of Comfort.
Okay, the way you said that sounds like you're just making it up now. But give me a cheer if you didn't have nautical studies. How do you get around? Like in school, we had nautical studies. I have my level 1 seamanship. Sounds kind of like how I got it. My level 1 seamanship in every orifice. But genuinely at school, I got my level 1 seamanship. For example, I can identify ships at night. I'll be like, "Oh my God, it's a boat, and the sun's gone to bed." I can also identify flags at sea. I'll be like, "Oh, it's a red flag. That means there's a strong riptide, or he's gaslighting her." That was nautical studies. But my favourite way to learn at school and in life is through stories and folktales. Would you like to hear a Shetland folktale? Thank God, because it's intrinsically part of the show. So, this is a selkie story. Now, the selkies are a magical race of creatures we have in Shetland and across the North Sea. And to this day, most people don't even believe they exist. Like the Welsh. Selkies appear in the form of a seal, but they can choose if they wish to pull back their skin, pull it off, and reveal these human forms beneath, beautiful human forms. They're kind of like Shetland's version of the mermaid. Sometimes they're seal, sometimes they're human. They're our number 1 excuse for bestiality. And you thought I was going to say sheep. A selkie's already wet. This story takes place in Shetland a long time ago when people were self-sufficient on the croft, their small farms. They grew the food they needed, or they reared sheep in the hills. And to add to their diet, they'd go off in boats and fish at sea. And at night, the only light in their house would be a small burning oil lamp in the window. It was 1982. And this story starts with the fisherman who's been out fishing all day, and he's come home, he's dragged his boat at the beach and tied it up, and he's finishing his work there on the beach. I mean, I say it's his work, it's just a Sudoku. I say it's a Sudoku. He's just written 6 in every box. But the moon rises so bright and vivid, he can see the colours around him. And by the moonlight, he notices in the corner of his eye, these seals come ashore. But then, to the fisherman's amazement, one by one, the seals stretch their skins off their body, revealing their beautiful human forms. They're selkies. The fisherman sees selkies. He didn't even know they existed. He thinks, oh my God, I'm tripping balls. Right. Who here also self-medicates? Give me a cheer. But I take CBD. If you don't know what CBD is, it is a legal form of marijuana. It's like marijuana without the legal high. Like if someone were to bake you a cake with absolutely zero taste. Someone just hands you a slice of the cake and the cake's like, hey, Marjolein, you should hang a live, laugh, love poster up on your wall. That cake has no taste. I just tell that joke so I can judge from your reactions what your home decor is like. But I drink CBD every night because I don't know how to go to sleep. It turns out you close your eyes. And I go through a month's worth a week at a time because it's a form of marijuana. You cannot overdose on it, and they say it cannot be a gateway drug. But there are some drugs where you do have to take the expert's advice. For example, give me a cheer if you, like me, have ever taken the morning after pill. Yes, yes. Never the men. Try it. Who knows what will come out? I hear that's how Kinder eggs are made. But I went for the morning after pill recently. When you do, the pharmacist gives you advice. She was like, you stupid fucking bitch. Again, Marjolein. No, but the pharmacist, she genuinely said, look, don't worry, if the pill doesn't work, it won't harm your unborn child in any way. Well, then it's an incredibly shit pill. This is the one thing I'm going for here, harm. And I turned to leave and I said something to her, which is the reason I drink so much CBD now. I said, thanks, you've been a lifesaver. And I bet some of you are wondering, Marjolein, you have it so together. You haven't forgotten to put trousers on today at all. How did you end up in a situation where you had to take the morning after pill? I'll explain. You see, he was French. I'll explain. I met this Frenchman and I took him back to mine and we had sex. And we didn't really speak till the next morning because during the night my mouth was just too full of dick. Like his and others. Going for that level 2 seamanship. Like, But in the morning, we had a really disjointed conversation because he's French, he barely speaks English. And I barely speak English. You heard about my education system at school? We didn't have time for French. Like, the only French I ever learned was as a very small child what I picked up from a little song called Lady Marmalade. Give me a cheer if you remember that banger. Give me a cheer if you want to hear my French a la Christina Aguilera. That's it! Which is very useful during the night. But in the morning, this Frenchman kept saying, Quel âge as-tu? Quel âge as-tu? Like, do you know what this means, Glasgow?
Yes. How old are you?
How old am I? Yes, thank you. How old would you say I am? 24. Okay, 24. How old would you say I am? 22. 22, you flirt, you went younger than him. Stop! No, I'll tell you my age, Glasgow. My actual age. I'm actually 34. Stop. No, go on. I could use it these days. Thank you. Thank you. That's a lovely reaction. You're like, what? No way. She could be in-flight entertainment to Epstein Island. You gave me a lovely reaction. The Frenchman's reaction was more of a... I was like, why, Frenchman? How old are you? He said, 22. Right. I didn't do this wizardry you called maths. But even I think that might be too young. Shout out, yes or no? Is that too young for me? Yeah. No, I think it is too young. Because on dating apps, I don't go below 25 because we recently learned about brain development in younger people. And until you're 25, you don't have a brain. But he seemed so much older because he was French with this accent that sounded like he'd been smoking since he was in utero. His mother was like, one for me and one pour le bébé. But really, he was just a baby himself. I thought, oh my God, I've inadvertently let a baby put a baby inside of me. I'm like a Russian doll you'd find in prison. That's why I went for the money after pill. Does that make sense? Thank you. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait a minute, Marjolein, why would you have a party full of 22-year-olds? I'll explain. They were rescuing me from a homeless man. I'll explain. So it was midnight, and I was in a rough part of Edinburgh. I know, sounds like an oxymoron. I was in Leith, and I was running from a park in the dark in Leith as fast as I could when I ran into a homeless man who offered me, this is true, a plate of lentils. And I was like, Mom's always said, don't accept food from strangers. So I said, no, thank you. I'm too full. But then the homeless man, he said, well, could you at least help me move my bed from here down into that dark alleyway? And I was like, well, Mom never said anything against that. He also said it puts the lotion on its skin. So I pick up the headboard of the bed, he picks up the back end, and we're moving down the alleyway. I'm going in first, he's coming in after me, and I'm almost at the end when he just drops his end of the bed, unzips his brakes, and starts to pee. And I think, good God, we put the bed in the bathroom. But the pee ricocheted off the wall, started spraying on me, so I leapt over the stream, out of the alleyway, and into the arms of the Frenchman who's passing by. Does that make sense? I'll go back and explain how it started. Have you ever seen the film Memento? I haven't. So how the night began, I was doing a gig like this one in the club. And I was on my way home, walking home from the gig. No alcohol, just a month's worth of CBD a week at a time. What's the worst that could happen? And as I was walking home, I was thinking, whoa, when's my next gig? And I thought, I know, I'll check the date by looking at the phase of the moon. Wow, some of you didn't do nautical studies and it shows. But I went to a park in Leith so I could have a nice look at the moon. And when I looked at the moon, I thought, oh my God, it's full. I've missed 2 gigs. But then, as I was staring at the moon, and I swear to God this is true, as I looked at the moon, a tiny little bit of the moon just broke off and fell to earth. And I was like, no, this doesn't happen. It can't happen yet. I reached down and I picked up this white, strange shaped piece of the moon. I was like, oh my God, this is a piece of the moon. This is all the powers of the moon. So I immediately ate it. And as soon as I did, I could hear a noise from the bushes like bam, 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 bam. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds like a phone. It could be attached to a cadaver. So I went to look for a body. And if you have a problem with that, that's the entire plot to Stand By Me. I I went into the bushes for a good look. I didn't find a body, but I did find a phone. And it was flashing and making noises because it was on the Find My Phone setting. So I walked out this bush holding this phone, and this man comes running up to me in the park going, "Oh, my phone! My phone, thank Christ, you found my phone!" I was like, "Here's your phone, man." He's like, "Oh my God, thank you. I dropped my phone. Oh, now all I need to find is my left AirPod." Your what? It's like, the small little wireless white headphone? I know. I'll put the music up on my phone. And we'll hear where it is. I don't know if you've ever had Harry Styles sing out of your own throat. Did you think it was a piece of the moon? Really? How do I explain to him I thought it was a piece of the moon when watermelon sugar is louder than me? That's why I had to run away from this man at midnight, run out the park when I ran up to a homeless man who offered me a plate of lentils, and I was like, "No, thank you, I'm too full of apple." Then we pick up his bed, we move it down the alleyway, but we get stuck in his bathroom, and he inadvertently pees on me, so I leap over his pee into the arms of the Frenchman and take the Frenchman back to mine, take the Frenchman inside of me, and I have to go to a pharmacy the next day. What I'm trying to say is, maybe CBD is the gateway drug. It's a gateway drug to the morning after pill. Let that story be a lesson. Story, oh my God. So the fisherman. The fisherman watched the selkies as they began to dance in the shurmel. Now the shurmel is a special word we have in Shetland for a sacred place. The shurmel is that bit of the beach where the wave laps up over and it travels up and down the beach as the tide rises and ebbs. The shurmel is neither land nor sea. A place of transience, the shurmel doesn't know what it is. A bit like Keir Starmer. That man's a fucking Tory if I ever saw one. That man is more Tory than Paddington's a bear. But as the fisherman watched the selkie people dance, he watched and saw this one selkie wife, the selkie woman with long silvery hair, and he instantly fell in love. Right, who here has fallen in love at first sight? Give me a cheer. If you were in a couple and only one of you cheered. No, that's mean, I'm not going to be mean because I've done it. Well, not in first sight, you nerds. I fell in love in 3 days. In 3 days, I fell in love with someone. And I didn't know that was possible. And I changed. I became a different person. I became one of those, when you know, you know. I became one of those, we finish each other's, well, he's not here right now. And I'm going to tell you about this guy. It's not the French boy, by the way. I never saw him again because he had to go to school the next day. No, this person, for the purpose of this show, I'm going to give him a nickname, and I'm going to call him my fisherman. Not because he was a fisherman. He isn't from Shetland, so I doubt he's ever seen the sea. I call him my fisherman because when we got together, I had an anal fissure. So as fast as we fell in love, we had to take something slow, if you catch my drift. He couldn't stick it up my back shaft, I was too bleedy. We could have anal. Does that, yeah? Are you okay? So this is the part of the show where I sometimes lose the room. Like, I had a reviewer, and I quote, who said, "Her lilting, soft island tones don't suit talking about the rough and coarse material. She should be more surreal. Be more surreal." And all I heard was seal, 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 so here we go. The fisherman watched this beautiful selkie woman dance the whole night, not realizing how much time had passed. The moon was gone. because I ate it. And the sun had begun to rise. With the first light of the sun dancing across the waves, the selkie folk realised the humans would be up soon. So one by one, they put their sealskins back on and slipped away into the sea. One by one, the selkie people became seals again and left, all but the selkie wife with the long silvery hair. She'd lost her skin. And without being her true seal form, she couldn't return to her true home. She was stuck there. And she sat down in the shurmel between the two worlds and begun to cry. And the fisherman saw her and his heart broke. He went up to her and he wrapped his jacket around her and looked after her. He took her home and the two eventually fell in love. They were even married. And over the years, they had 2 children, a boy and a girl. I don't know what she's going to teach them because she can't even knit. She's a seal woman. But I like this. It's a love story. It's a fish out of water love story. I do, but it truly is like that kind of genre, you know, like The Little Mermaid or Splash or Jaws. And like, the selkie wife, she has a learning curve, but to be fair, every relationship has a learning curve. It does. Like, I remember when I first met my fisherman, and we'd been going out for just a few months when we actually moved in together. And when we moved in, we'd been living together for a few weeks, and one day my fisherman came up and presented me with all these little bits of paper. And I was like, what are these? And he was like, receipts, Marjolein. And I was like, no, what are these? And he's like, God damn the Shetland education system. Those are numbers. And what happened was every time we went to the shops, even for food shops, he would keep the receipts and then show me what I owed him later. And I was like, I've never done this in a relationship before. My mantra is, if the fridge is empty, you feed it. I was like, if I knew we were keeping tabs of everything we bought and purchased for food in this household, this man would owe me 2.5 sheep by now. I also love this bit of the selkie story because there's the family. There's a son and a daughter, a boy and a girl. And it reminds me of my childhood with my brother. I also had a sister, but she doesn't matter for this show. And I got my first job in Shetland when I was a bit long in the tooth. I was 6. And every Saturday, me and my brother would work to my dad in the sheep. And every day he would pay us for this £1 a day. And my brother wasn't happy. He wanted to have a meeting. So my brother sat me down, and then up, and then down, and then up again. Because we had all our meetings on a seesaw. And my brother's like, I'm sick of this. We need more money than £1 a day. This is ridiculous. We're going on strike. And I said, yes, but we're idiot children. So by going on strike, all we did was hide in the sheep shed. 15 minutes later, Dad came in and said, oh, you're ready. And we're like, no, Dad, no. We refuse to work in the sheep for £1 a day. We want more. And Dad went, okay. And I remember him reaching into his boiler suit pocket and pulling out 2 50p coins and offering us 1 each. And we said yes, because they were bigger and had more sides. Could use some of that maths you speak of. We could have learned something. Learning, okay, the story. Don't let me get distracted again. Right, this is it. We're going to do it this time. So, we go back to the selkie family. A few years in the future now, the sister's 6 and the brother's 9. On this day we return to them. The fisherman this day is working in the sheep in the hills. I mean, I say he's working. He's just reading a Take a Break magazine. I mean, I say he's reading. He's just licking the problem page. And the selkie wife stands in the kitchen. She's broken another plate, trying to balance them on her nose. And the boy and the girl have successfully hidden from their dad in the sheep shed. So they're left to their own devices in the sheep shed, playing around and exploring, and they find their dad's chest of fishing gear that they're not normally allowed inside because it's too full of dangerous objects, like hooks and knives and Sudoku magazines that reveal he's an idiot. Yet they go into this chest and they pull thing after thing out, and lines and ropes and tackles, and then they get to the bottom. And in the bottom of this chest, they find a seal skin. And they pull it out, and the seal skin still feels wet, like it's just come from the sea moments before. And they stretch it out between the two of them, and there's not one single knife mark on it. And they think, how? How has this not been made into slippers yet? So they run into the kitchen and they show their mother the sealskin. And as soon as the selkie wife sees it, as soon as she sees her skin, she's overjoyed. She knows that's her skin. And she says to the children, where did you find my skin? And then they tell her, we found it in Dad's fishing chest. And that's when she realizes what actually happened all those years ago. That the fisherman had stolen her skin, her truest part of herself, and had taken her in. He wasn't her savior, he was her captor. And that's when them red flags, you know. But the selkie wife, without even a second glance at her children, she just left. She ran out the house. She ran down the hill. She stood in the shurma, the place between the two worlds, took off her dress, put her skin on, and swam away. And as a bairn, as a child, I would hear this bit of the story, and I'd be so mad at her for abandoning her children. But now, at 34, I know I don't like it. At 34, I hear this story, and I'm beginning to think, maybe it's not true. And I can tell you why I think it's not true, for 3 reasons. Number one, it only took her one red flag. Number two, she's able to immediately reclaim her identity. Number three, I can tell you why I know it's not true. I know it's not true. I know it's a fucking fairy tale, because that's not what happened to me. I don't know if you noticed any of the red flags I put throughout this show about the story. I don't know if you think it's normal to fall in love with someone immediately, you nerds. I don't know if you think it's normal to move in with someone within just like a few months, and I don't know if you think it's normal that your partner should start stockpiling receipts of things that you never even agreed to buy until you owe them so much money. You owe them over £1,387.36, and I can tell you that number exactly because he sent it to me in a fucking spreadsheet. Like, the selkie wife was able to recognize what the fisherman had done to her because it was her entire skin taken in one go. That didn't happen to me, because if that happened to me, I'd be flayed. Instead, what happened to me was just bit by bit, piece by piece, comment by comment over time. Like, take off that makeup. You don't need a part-time job, I'll look after you. Say no to that gig. You've had enough to drink tonight. I'd rather just reach for the lube than try and pleasure you because you're too much work and I wouldn't want to have sex with you anyway. Comment by comment, piece by piece, small words and actions that slowly broke me down as a person, and I didn't even realize it was happening. I didn't. And whenever anything he said or did actually upset me, and I tried to question it, that's when the gaslighting would happen. And I hate when people say gaslighting is just like one little lie. It's not. True gaslighting is a systematic, continued use of lies that's used to confuse you and keep you down under their control. You can't just throw words like gaslighting about, and I know, because I got a really bad bruise from an Oxford dictionary one time. But when he started to tell me his version of events, it literally felt like the rug of reality was pulled from under my feet. I started to feel dizzy, like I would feel like it's on the Lancers in a fun fair. And this is actually really hard for me to speak about because I'm a Shetlander. I've never been to a fun fair. And other times, when something he'd say or do would make me feel bad, I just thought I deserved it because I was behaving like a brat. I was behaving like a child hiding in the sheep shed because he kept treating me like a child. He had all the authority and he had all the power in the relationship. I was just stuck on the bottom of the seesaw, and the only way I knew how to react was like a child in a parental-child relationship. Like, I didn't recognize myself, so I thought, of course he's shouting at me. I need to be shouted at. I'm misbehaving. Like, in the very end of the relationship, it was him who dumped me. Like, how shit do you have to be for your abuser to leave you? I can't believe you clapped. that bit. But that's what happened. He dumped me, but he said we should carry on living and staying in the same bed and doing as we've done as before. Nothing should change. So that's what happened. I did as he wanted. I didn't move out. And then a few nights later, I got drunk with my best friend, who I hadn't drunk with in a long, long time, because he was out of town. And I told her everything about the treatment, about how my life was, how it was in the flat, and she was horrified. The next day, she came to the flat when he was out. She packed all my belongings up in her car, and she begged me to leave with her, and I still wouldn't leave him. I stood and I watched as my best friend drove off with all my belongings in her car and thought, now I have no pants. It wasn't until weeks after that I was doing a gig in another city in Scotland, and I met up with this male comic I hardly knew at the time, the straight white male comic. And he said, Marjolein, where are you staying? I've heard you split up with a fisherman. Like, do you need to crash at mine? Like, where are you staying? And I was like, no, I'm fine. I'm still in the flat. And the comic was like, in different rooms? And I was like, no, we're in the same bed. And he was horrified. He was like, get the fuck out of there. Do you know how bad something has to be to horrify a straight white male comic? That's the first time I realized how bad my situation was, when someone I barely knew got upset on my behalf. That night, I drove back to the city where I was living, but I didn't go back to our flat. I didn't go back to his rules. I went to my friend who had my belongings, and I finally got clean pants. Because that's the thing, I didn't leave him because I was out of my mind. To be honest, there's one night when I thought it'd be easier just to leave this planet than leave him. That was my exit strategy. Like, it was bad. It was bad. I couldn't work out, why didn't I leave him before? Why didn't I get out of the situation? And now I know what I do in responses of trauma with, like, fight or flight. I didn't fight back. I couldn't, because every time I tried to say my version of events, that's when the gaslighting would happen. I'd feel dizzy and I'd lose any sense of reality. I didn't go into flight mode, we know that, because it took me so long to leave. Instead, I kind of would just freeze when things got bad. Or rather, my body would freeze while my mind would fuck off into the astral plane, somewhere safe. Like, he would be saying his version of events, it wouldn't make sense, it would be dizzy, it would be hurtful, and my mind would say, nah, this is too painful, we're getting you out of this, and just take me away and put me into a safe and happy space, like Folktales or fairy tales, or sometimes the hard shit Disney. Like, I remember when the last arguments we ever had, we were lying in bed and I was begging him to stop spending money I didn't know about and making me further in debt. I was begging him, and he was telling me I don't know how money works, even though I'd never been in debt before I met him. He's telling me I don't know how money works, even though for my craft work I've been retired since I was 10. And my brain was like, no, this is too confusing, this doesn't make sense, you're getting out of here. My brain just took me, and I couldn't hear him anymore. His voice went to grey noise. I couldn't even see him anymore. Instead, my brain just took me out of that situation and dropped me into the kitchen of the selkie wife. And I was standing there in front of two children I don't have, because the morning after pill works. And these two children were just handing me my skin, and I just had this full-on vision of me just grabbing my skin and running out the house and going down to the show mill and putting it on and escaping as my true self again. And maybe it's just as well that my body would freeze while my mind fucked off, because if my body and mind had been working together, I would have gotten out that bed and I'd have run out that flat. I'd have gone down the street and I'd have gone to the sea, and I'd have dove in the water just to swim away, just to get home to Shetland where it's safe. But I'm not a selkie. I can't breathe underwater, so I'd be slipping beneath the waves. So thank God fish don't have hands. Your clapping's really offensive to the fish. If I'm very, very honest with you, the story I've just told you, this experience, this thing I've just gone through, this is what the show is meant to be in 2022. This is what Thank God Fish Don't Have Hands was meant to be. But every time I tried to write it, I couldn't understand what was happening. So instead I just made up a show where I pretended to have ADHD. No, I have ADHD. I do. As soon as I found out I had ADHD, I phoned all of my exes, not the fisherman, but I phoned all of my other exes because I wanted to find out who gave it to me. But yeah, I tried to write the show back in 2022. I really did. But I couldn't do it because my mind was so scrambled by everything that happened. I couldn't work out what was real or what was false, what was gaslighting. So I went to a therapist. And I don't know if you know how hard it is to step forward to a therapist and say that you are in an abusive relationship and there was a narcissist involved and you want to write a fringe show about it. But you are not the narcissist? And the therapist was amazing. Her main concern, though, was that I hadn't confronted these feelings and thoughts before because I do the thing she calls hiding behind jokes. So you're giving me no help for the show, lady. But she was helpful. She said one of the reasons I wasn't able to write the show, one of the reasons I wasn't able to make sense of it is because I kept trying to find a reason for why the abuse started. And she said, you won't ever find that reason because no one deserves to be treated that way. And you won't ever understand it because you don't have the mind of an abuser. Not a narcissist. Just a really great person. But she also said something else. She said that there's actually 3 stages to domestic abuse, okay? The first stage is where you're the victim, and that's a selkie wife stuck in the kitchen. The selkie wife under his control. And you'll see that I tell you that folktales an analogy because it's easier for me to talk about it than to go into my story in depth. But then there's the second stage, and that's when you're a survivor. And that's when the selkie wife gets out the door, which can seem like the hardest thing to do in the world. You may think that your friends and family aren't there for you anymore, but believe me, you've been made to think that. And not only that, there are countless organizations on the other side if you can just get through that door. And it gets better because there's a third stage, and the third stage is thriver. And that's when the selkie wife stands on the shirmal and puts her real skin on, becomes herself again, and swims away herself, nay, even better than she was before. But I wanted to do that. It's like, how? And she's like, well, the problem is what he has done. What any abuser does is they break you down as a person. They take your mind away from you in the sense where you lose your core values, you lose who you were as a person, and you have to build that back. And unfortunately, that takes time and work, and 2 things I'm never going to do. No, I'm trying. I am trying. So this therapy started early in 2023, early last year, when I started properly trying to write Marj. Now, when the therapy started, I started talking to my therapist. I also went on a tour of some folk musicians. Now, touring with folk musicians and touring with comedians are 2 worlds that will never meet. When you go touring with folk musicians, when you go to the lobby in the hotel in the morning, getting ready for breakfast, you walk into the lobby and all the other musicians are there. And they always come up to you, and there's one particular musician, Rachel Sermani, would always say things like, what did you dream about last night? When you go to a hotel lobby full of other comedians, they're like, yeah, fuck off! Wait, have you got my Coke? Different worlds. So when you're touring with comedians, sometimes if bad things happen, you're like, push down the pain and write jokes about it, move on. When you're touring with folk musicians, they like to talk about your feelings, dig up past traumas, tell your story, share the bad things that happened to you, and then they steal your stories and write them into their songs. But when I was on this tour of the folk musicians, on this tour we had 1 day in Shetland, less than 24 hours, the shortest time I'd ever spent at home. It was bizarre for me to do this. So we did the gig, and the next morning I had some time with my family, and I had a little hour with my nephew Magnus, and spent some time with him before I got on the plane back here. And we're flying away from Shetland, and I was sad to leave. And as I was sitting on the plane, I started to get this incredible pain in my chest. Incredible. And I thought, this isn't right. This is a folk tour. I haven't done any coke. And then as I was feeling this pain in my chest, all of a sudden I could just see my nephew, Magnus, in the chair next to me. Like I could see him, like he was actually there. And he was linked to this pain in my chest. And that's when I realized I just really missed him. I was so sad to leave because I loved him. And that's what I realized. That was the first time I let myself feel love in years. Because from that abusive relationship, I didn't think I deserved it. I pushed down the part of me that received love or gave love. And just from the innocence, just from my nephew, just the sweetest boy in the world, I felt love for the first time in such a long time. So that's why I picked the batshit crazy music at the start of the show. That's why I did it. It was for Magnus. Which is a shame because I spent so much time this hour talking about goblin cock, he's never going to see it. Now I realise that this show has gone to some really dark places. I'm aware. The French. But I don't want to leave you on a low. This is a comedy show, Marjolein. Make them happy. And thank you so much for coming to the show. I'm aware the show goes to a dark place, right? And I don't want to leave you feeling vulnerable or sad. So what I want to do is I want to finish this on an upbeat. Would you like an upbeat? Yeah, let's have that actual literal upbeat. Ooh, yeah, it's a Shetland band, the Revellers, playing their song Skeletons. The Revellers started as a tribute act to the Levellers, but we couldn't afford any of that music because it's copyright. I just want to say, my show isn't called Marj because I ran out of ink. We all know I have access to copious amounts of blood. My show is called Marj because for the longest time, I was only living as a fraction of myself because I was made to forget who I was and behave to someone else's choices. But no longer because I'm rebuilding myself by looking in here. My tits! Yeah! Both of them! I'm gonna rebuild who I am, and I'm gonna build it stronger. And I don't know if this show has affected any of you. I really, really hope it hasn't. But if you have been affected by this, I just want you to know that no one should ever treat you that way. You deserve to be treated by the love, by the people you care for and love yourself. And anyone you let into your life should make you feel wanted and never shame you for anything, not even your sexuality.